Hey guys, John V from PhoneArena here. You're watching our video review of the Samsung Galaxy S6. It's a little hard to imagine it, but this is actually the 6th generation Samsung Galaxy S smartphone. And the S6 follows in a long storied tradition, but instead of sporting plastic this time around, it's going to totally new redesign, one we feel to be the biggest shakeup to the series thus far. It's now sporting some premium choice materials, but more importantly is that Samsung has been seeing some heated competition of late. And for 2015, it looks like they're setting the bar high. So with that, is the Galaxy S6 going to be the king of kings in the smartphone space? This is without a doubt the best design phone we've seen from Samsung, and that's saying a lot just because the company's devices were never really known for their designs. They lacked the prestige that we saw in industrial designs from Sony and HTC, but with the Galaxy S6, that's all changing. They now have a premium-made smartphone, fitting for a flagship device. So gone is the plastic construction of previous devices, replaced instead with an all-glass surface on the front and in the back. It's Gorilla Glass 4, giving it lots of strength. It has a slick feel, and you have the metal trim bezel that outlines the handset. Now, from the front, it looks distinctively like a Galaxy S device of some sort, but from a profile view, especially from the bottom, you could see some similarities to the iPhone's new design language. But beyond that, we gotta hand it to Samsung. It just has a new premium quality that we really appreciate. It's pretty much uniform, it's skinny, uniformly thin, except for the camera. It kind of sticks out a little bit, and it has a very solid feel in the hand, good construction as well. It's a little bit top heavy, so you got to be careful with that. But beyond that, there are some good and bad qualities about the new design language. Of course, you have the premium aspect of it, which is nice. On the downside though, they had to remove some of the staple design characteristics from last year's model. So no longer does it have a water resistant construction, so you really can't submerge this underwater. You don't have a micro SD card slot, and the battery is not removable anymore, but they did offer to put in built-in wireless charging, so that's great. So overall, we gotta applaud Samsung for the effort. They finally have a flagship phone that has a very premium quality with its design, and we really dig this direction. Now, if you look around the handset, you find some staple features. So you have the home button right here. It's very tactile and incorporates the fingerprint sensor. And this year's model is even easier to operate. It's similar to Apple's Touch ID sensor, where all you gotta do is just gently press your thumb over to unlock the device. It's flanked by the capacitive back and recent apps menu. On the left side, you have the separated volume controls. They're pretty easy to feel out, and they're very responsive. On the right, the power button along with the nano SIM slot. On the top, you just have the IR blaster, and you have a noise cancellation microphone. And on the bottom, you have the 3.5mm headset jack, the micro USB 2.0 port, the speaker grill, and you also have the standard microphone right there. You flip it around to the rear, all that's there is just the 16 megapixel camera there. It is sticking out just a little bit, so be careful with that. And alongside, you have the LED flash, and you have also the heart rate sensor. Not stopping at just the design, Samsung pushed the envelope with the display here. So it's packing along a 5.1-inch Quad HD 1440 by 2560 Super AMOLED display. So it makes the jump to Quad HD resolution, just like the Note 4 before, but they managed to pack it in this 5.1-inch size screen. So you get a pixel density count of 577 pixels per inch. And you really see that in things like the web browser. The tiniest of text has a lot of sharpness and clarity to it. We definitely notice it over 1080p displays, but from a normal distance, it's really hard to distinguish that. Beyond the detail and clarity, this is the most accurate Super AMOLED panel they've made, just because when you look at the color gamut chart, it shows that it's very color accurate, pretty much hitting the target with all the various color reference values and all the gradients, and also has that almost near ideal perfect color temperature of 6500 Kelvin. Specifically, it's 6550 Kelvin, which means that it's neither too warm or too cold, so the display offers a very natural tone to it, and it's also the brightest Super AMOLED display they've produced. It emits a blinding 563 nits of brightness, so outdoor visibility is not an issue. And of course, it has all the qualities of the technology: wide viewing angles. You could set it to different modes. For example, adaptive mode, which will adjust things like the color temperature for watching movies, so it enhances the experience. Overall, though, the display itself is just as beautiful as the design, and it's really nice that they continue to trend by pushing the envelope in terms of resolution and quality. The software experience too receives its fair share of changes, and they're the good kind of changes. Now I'm going to show you what this latest version of Touchwiz is running on the Galaxy S6, but it's no different on the Galaxy S6 Edge. There are some added features, but I'll talk about that in the review of the Galaxy S6 Edge. So with this version of Touchwiz running on top of Android 5.0.2 Lollipop, they've gone more with a less is more approach. So it's more of a simplified, straightforward experience than ever before. And you see it right away with the visual presentation here at the home screen. So you have a cleaner looking font type, you have larger size icons in the app panel, and it makes use of Google's material design. So it uses bright colors to accent several of the core applications with the experience. And you also have that parallax-like effects with the background wallpaper. So if you tilt it, you sense a depth, you get a sense of depth with it. But beyond that, the new thing here is the ability to download various themes, and that really accentuates the experience just because you could have it very different looking from before. So not only does it change things like the wallpaper, but as well as the icons themselves and the layout of several of the core applications like the dial pad, the calendar, and even the calculator. And it's a good way of complementing your personality. Now, this is becoming more apparent with many of the software experience we've seen, but we don't find it quite as expansive as what HTC is doing with Sense 7.0, but still in a good direction. In terms of feature set, they've reduced it tremendously from before. Gone are things like air view and air gestures. Instead, you have some of the core ones that remain here. For example, you have one-handed mode, so you could put some of the core applications into a smaller window, so it's easier to interact with one finger. Secondly, you have also multi-window. It's still available here. You can access it by going through the Rolodex in the recent apps menu, or just by holding down the recent apps menu itself. You have two applications running on top of one another, so you have that true multitasking experience. Overall though, it's just nice that they've gone with a simplified experience. There are not as many redundancies with it, and it's not overwhelming. Instead, what we have here is just a very streamlined interface along with the feature set. Allows for even first-time users to jump right in, and we do really appreciate this new direction. So Sammy decided to go all in-house, empowering both its Galaxy S6 and S6 Edge. It's using the octa-core Exynos 7420 processor, which is based on 64-bit architecture. And interestingly enough, it shares some commonalities with Qualcomm's Snapdragon 810 chip. Basically, it consists of 4 Cortex-A57 cores running at 2.1 GHz. And then you have another 4 Cortex-A53 cores running in at 1.5 GHz. Now, what's different about the two is that the Exynos chip is manufactured using the 14nm process, whereas the Snapdragon 810 goes with the 20nm process. So with that, you get some space saving in the process, and subsequently you'd hope to get also better power efficiency out of it. The result though is the fastest Galaxy S phones we've seen to date. It has a lot of finesse, super snappy, very responsive. Navigating through the home screen here is a breeze. It launches apps. You can move in and out of different ones very quickly. And it's just nice that there's no lag from what we've seen so far. And it's even great for gaming. If you're playing some of those 3D demanding games, you're not going to have an issue here with the handset. It's just buttery smooth. But then again, we kind of question its long-term consistency, just because the Note 4 before, after months of using it, installing different applications, we tend to see a diminished performance over time. But we're certainly hopeful about the experience here with the S6. So right now, for what it is just unbelievably fast. Honestly, we've never been disappointed by the cameras in Samsung smartphones. They're always class-leading, evident by the Galaxy S5's camera and subsequently the Note 4. And with the S6 and the S6 Edge, they're surely coming to the table with something spectacular as well. Now, both handsets are paired with the same 16-megapixel Sony sensor used by the Note 4, but this time around, they've been fashioned with an even wider f1.9 aperture lens. And with that, it's able to actually draw in more light, so you could expect it to perform better under lower lighting conditions. Now, before I go into the quality itself, let's talk about the camera app. Now, the cool thing about it is that you could instantly launch it by just double pressing the home button anytime, even when it's turned off, and it'll jump into the interface itself right away. And just like the less is more approach of Touchwiz, we see it here as it's sporting a cleaner looking UI. It's not as cluttered as last year. The majority of the space is reserved for the viewfinder. It's flanked by some icons on the left and right sides. The left side, you have things like HDR. You could add different effects, set the timer, and change the modes like the resolution and whatnot. While on the right, you have the shutter keys and you have the various modes. Now, the various modes include auto, selective focus, panoramic, slow motion, fast motion, virtual shot. You can download some additional ones too from the store if you want. But the most compelling one here is the Pro mode. And this is going to appease hardcore shutterbugs just because you could change some of the parameters here with the camera. You could adjust the white balance if you want, the ISO, the exposure compensation, and you could even change some of the color temperature here and also the focus. So it's really nice you have this at your disposal. When you want to capture the moment, nothing does justice like the camera in the S6 and the S6 Edge. It just takes some amazing looking photos to die for. Now, the 16-megapixel cameras are most effective when lighting is in abundance. So with outdoor shots, you're going to capture a ton of detail and overall the photos come out very sharp. You have some versatility in that just because you could crop photos later on without any loss in quality. It handles dynamic range pretty decently. It has a very neutral exposure, although when HDR mode is used, it actually touches the shadows and highlights to further draw out some of the details. Now, most phones crumble under the pressure when it comes to low lighting photography, but that's not the case here with the handsets. Now, thanks to its wider f1.9 aperture lens and paired with its optical image stabilization, the S6 and the S6 Edge is pretty usable under lower lighting conditions. Now, of course, there's that certain degree of diminished quality when compared to outdoor shots where lighting's plentiful, but it's minimalized to the point that, surprisingly enough, details are still defined, although a little bit on the softer side. But it's still complemented with a delightful white balance setting, and best of all, noise is pretty much minimalized in the process. So nighttime photography proves to be very good with the handset. Now, on top of that, you have things like Panoramic Mode. It's a seamless process this time around. It's simple and quick, and it stitches the photos together in a seamless fashion, so there's no artifacting or any odd discrepancies in the shots. Its selective focus mode is great at capturing macro shots as well, just because you could add that bokeh or out of focus effect post shot, and it accentuates the subject that's in the shot. And finally, there is the virtual shot mode, which is a little bit gimmicky, to tell you the truth, just because you take a 360-degree capture of a subject, and later on you could go back and interact with it. We wouldn't use it as much, to tell you the truth, but it's there if you want to use it. Overall, though, the new 16-megapixel camera is a beast of its own. It is a great replacement to any point-and-shoot, and goes to show that Samsung knows how to make some killer cameras for its phones. At the same time, you won't be disappointed either with its video recording quality. Now, there are a ton of different modes offered by the handset. You have Ultra HD, Quad HD, 1080p at 60 and 30 frames per second, and 720p at 120 frames per second. Whichever one you go with, you won't be disappointed at all. Now, the best, of course, is going to be Ultra HD just because of the staggering amount of details it's able to capture. It has a very gradual exposure adjustment, the continuous autofocus is spot on, and optical image stabilization helps to keep it shake-free. There's even a very useful magnification up to 8 times digital zoom, and when you pair that with 4K recording, it's still more than usable on several occasions. Following the new guidelines of Touchwiz, the music player itself features a streamlined and simplified interface, and it's pretty pleasant overall, but we wouldn't say it's as dazzling as the Sense 7.0 music player. Regardless of that, the single speaker on the bottom pounds out 73.7 decibels of power, which is pretty strong tone, but it lacks any bite behind its punch. So basically the entire thing sounds a little bit on the subdued side and thin. However, there are settings for Sound Alive, which is an equalizer option, so you can get a little bit fine tuning and better fidelity out of it. If watching videos is your kind of thing, you'll be pleased by the experience here on the Galaxy S6 and the S6 Edge, just because that Super AMOLED display, especially with adaptive mode, makes videos come alive, and it supports a variety of codecs out of the box. Now, as far as playback is concerned, it's smooth, lag-free, and the overall performance is really nice. But of course, the Super AMOLED display helps to give it a little bit more pop in its experience. The other thing here is that you have the same pop-up play feature from before, so you can basically put the video in its own separate window, and you have that multitasking element in place, so you could continue watching the video in a separate window while also doing other things like surfing the web or running a different application. It could have been better, but at least the S6 suffices for basic calling needs. Voices through the earpiece have a little bit of a hiss to them, and on the other end of the line, our callers say that our voice has a slightly thinner quality to it, but at least the speakerphone is powerful enough to use in noisy conditions. Obviously, we have to commend Samsung for the new premium design of the S6. It's also extremely thin with its construction, but in doing so, there's a compromise made to its battery capacity. It actually shrinks down to a 2550 milliamp hour one, which is down from the S5's larger 2800 milliamp hour battery, which was also user replaceable. But thankfully though, they've added built-in wireless charging to this, so it supports both the Qi and PMA standards. So you have that option available to you. Now, as far as the overall battery life, we find that it's less than the Galaxy S5 in our battery benchmark test. In fact, the S6 achieves a mark of 7 hours and 14 minutes from a full charge, which is average and good, but it doesn't beat the S5's mark of 7 hours and 38 minutes. Of course, that could be attributed to many things. One of them in particular could be the Quad HD screen, especially paired with the lower capacity battery. But regardless of that, when it comes to normal everyday use, you're going to get at least a day of normal usage. And if you have to charge it, it offers rapid charging, so it has one of the fastest recharging times of any handset. You see this here? This is as close to perfection as it can get. Samsung delivered the goods here with the S6, and it doesn't disappoint. The new design language is something that's super noteworthy for them, because now no longer do they have a cheap feeling phone, it's premium in every facet. On top of that, it's a great all-around performer, and it has also the specs needed to be future-proof. When you think about pricing, it's going to be on the same level as some of the other flagship devices, but knowing what's inside, the performance and the good looks, it's a home run for Samsung. They've really set the bar high so far for 2015, and it's going to be a force to be reckoned with. So if you guys want to learn more about the Samsung Galaxy S6, you can check out our website, PhoneArena.com. It's John V. Thanks for watching.